Welcome to Culture Before Content. Culture Before Content, from Music for All and presented by Yamaha. And now, here's your host, David Duarte.
Hey, welcome to the show. I'm David Duarte, your host for Culture Before Content. Whether you're tuning in live or catching the replay, I am so glad you are here. At Music for All and within the Culture Before Content community, our mission is to create, provide, and expand positively life-changing experiences through music. We are also incredibly grateful to have Yamaha as our national presenting sponsor. Well, thanks for tuning in. If you're joining us live, this is your chance to be part of the conversation. You can drop a comment on YouTube or Facebook, and we might feature it here on the show. I love hearing your thoughts, questions, and experiences, so don't be shy. Whether it's a quick shout out, a question for our guest, we got a doozy today, or something that resonates with you, jump in and be a part of that discussion. If you're catching us on the replay, you can watch the full episode anytime on Facebook or YouTube. It's perfect for revisiting key moments or watching at your own pace. Do you prefer to listen on the go? Audio episodes drop every Monday on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and other major platforms, so you can stay connected with us wherever you are. For all the latest episodes and past conversations, visit musicforall.org/podcasts. It's your one-stop shop for everything Culture Before Content. What a great show. Anyway, before we jump in today's discussion, I wanted to share something with you. For me, it's super exciting. I recently got a chance to write an article. It's my second one, on the Music for All's winter issue called "Thrive in the Moment." It's all about embracing the present as educators and musicians, focusing on meaningful experiences rather than just on long-term outcomes. You can find it now on the Music for All's website under their publication section. Just visit education.musicforall.org/publication and check it out. And if you want, you can always drop me a comment. I always learn from all of you. As it says in the article, I don't claim to be an expert. I just claim to learn with all of us. All right, moving on to last week's show. We had an incredible conversation with Matt Wood, director of bands at Ridgeview Middle School in Round Rock, Texas. Matt shared what truly drives student motivation, how he built a culture where students take ownership, and why trust is the foundation of a thriving band program. Is that not the truth? He discussed strategies for increasing engagement, fostering accountability, and making practice a natural part of student life. I love that. I need to practice. We also talked about his experiences at TMEA, which was just a couple weeks ago, and Music for All, and how these lessons continue to shape his approach as an educator. And just to share, we had a comment left by Ryan Spiegel that said, and I quote, "Matt Wood is an absolute legend in music education. His passion for building a positive culture, mentoring students, and giving back to the community is seriously inspiring." So if you missed it, I highly recommend you go and check it out. All right. We are ready for this week's guest. So this is someone who has shaped the culture of one of the most respected band programs in the country today. Joining us today is Michael Pote, a highly recommended band director and educator known for his work at Carmel High School. Michael has spent years refining his approach, and today we'll unpack the key lessons he's learned and how he's built successful ensembles and what band directors can do to create a thriving music program beyond just the music. Oh, and if you want to connect with Michael in person, which I think you should do, he will be at the Sweetwater Director Academy this summer, where I will also get to attend. Maybe I'll get a private lesson. You never know. I can't wait to get this conversation going. So let's just jump right in. Please welcome to the show, Mr. Michael Pote.
Hi there. Thank you.
Hey, thank you. Thanks for putting up with my lovely long introduction.
Nice.
I get to do that every week. Anyway, I was just thinking to myself, because we've got a little chance for those of you who are listening or watching. You get a chance to meet somebody we have never met. This is our first time actually engaging in discussion, but we get a chance to get to know each other for just a few minutes, and it always comes down to, what are we really talking about today? And so, just to frame the conversation, I look at your program, and I think, as I always say, who does not know your program? So if you don't know his program, you should really go check it out. But because here's one of the things that just fascinates me to start our conversation: marching bands, amazing; jazz bands, amazing; concert bands, amazing. So if from a cultural standpoint and from where I see it, this has nothing to do with about your ensembles. This has everything to do with what it takes to put that together.
Sure.
So let's start the conversation, thinking about today and thinking about the culture of your band program. What are some of the things that just, besides teaching what you do, what are some of the words or buzz terms that pop out?
So I think the first thing to talk about is that we have an administration at Carmel High School or Carmel Clay Schools that absolutely, first of all, adores the arts and supports it and wants it to be successful. And so obviously, like we talked about earlier, is that there's a lot of kids in that school. So it gives us some opportunities to do things with ensembles like the concert band and stuff like that, like we talked about. But to start out, we have the support. We have the support of our parents. We have the support of our administration. We have kids that want to be involved in several different things. They're great at multitasking.
Well, I don't think it's just the kids. I think it's also the directors
Yeah.
as well. And huge shout out to your admin. But let's like inform the audience. I was always curious, how big is your school?
There are roughly 5,300 students there. A little
Like a
over
county.
five. Sorry,
That's like a county.
it is. Yeah. About a little over 500 plus students in the band program and color guard program. One of the things with this, our staff too, is that it's a pretty large staff. And one of the things I think is maybe a little bit different about the culture of our staff is that even though I am listed as on the screen director of bands and Chris Crakey is listed as the marching band director and Kyle and Matt, and everyone else is involved, our color guard staff, whatnot, all involved with that. There's no one person who's in charge of any one thing to that level. So we're always working just as hard as we can on whatever is going on, and bringing our particular skills to that activity.
So what do you, I mean, besides, because that's a lot of shared responsibility. I mean, it's kind of the things that you do with the kids, not just yourself and the staff, but, it must have taken or has taken like a little bit of a learning curve to work together as a team. Because, and maybe that comes back to how did you come up with this shared vision, or how do you continue with this shared vision?
Sure. Well, part of that is just longevity. And having started with Richard Saucedo, obviously, who started that program or started it on the trajectory that it's continued since he's left. So the longevity of the staff working together, and just we've become less about being, people working together and more of a family. And I think that, we always the concept of band as family certainly is resonant in all programs around the country, but in ours in particular, it feels even more that way, just from the sheer amount of time that we've all been working together. And we have a trust. I know what I do well. I know what I don't do well. I know that there's someone on our staff who does it better than me, and I'm perfectly fine with them doing it and, getting the credit for it if they're doing it.
Yeah, and I think that also takes some learning, as we get older. And like I said, we figured out that we've been teaching pretty much the same amount of time. And I keep using the comment, the older I get, the less I know. But I think I've become much more aware of it, and I actually think that has become a strength for my personal self, is that actually acknowledging what I don't know. Because what I think that does, and I think maybe you can speak to this, is when I don't know something, going out and finding the resource to make it so that it's not a weakness, that it becomes a strength or something I need to personally work on, or even the students get to personally work on, and so, you are here for a reason. And so like, tell us what, and it's always hard to talk about yourself, but give us some of your strengths.
That's hard to do, isn't it? I guess.
Isn't it?
Well, I love being involved in how we sound. And Kyle Young, who's one of the other band directors at high school, also really, really into this. It's like just really geeking out over what does our concert F sound like, and are we creating overtones? And so kind of starts with that, and then the tuning system that we use and how we approach that. For me, if that's a strength, it's a strength. It's certainly a love. A love of creating ensemble textures that blend and work together to create a beautiful sound, whether it's sitting down or whether it's moving around on a field or whether it's playing jazz ensemble.
Oh, and just on the screen, your website has come up. Can you throw that, Patrick? Can you throw up the website up there? Yeah. So if I always tell people, well, if you're watching along, you can always kind of double dip here and look up something. But it's Michael Pote Music, all one word.com, MICHAELPOTE music.com. And maybe talk a little bit about your website and what your website has to offer.
The website just kind of it's very recent. And it's a way for people, if they do want to reach out and contact me. It also shows some of the things that I've been working on with. There are videos on there of us with some of our ensembles using the Harmony Director. There are drone maps that are available on there to teach people how to tune in literature a little bit better, or guide them in a way to do that. Just kind of a clearinghouse almost of if you want to get in contact with me, and also showing some of the things that we're working on at Carmel.
Yeah, and I always tell our guests, and especially if you're listening, always contact people. You never know when they respond.
Absolutely.
And when they do, the trademark Carmel song. And I actually want to give Lincoln Rowe, who was also a former guest. So for those of you listening, he just chimed in a little bit. He posted on Facebook this week, and it was funny because I always think I'm listening to their band. So it pulled up when I started listening, and you were playing a chorale.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just, to me, all I heard was togetherness, resonance, and it just fit in. And then and talk about geeking out. As soon as the cutoff happened, the echo, the resonance that went on for a couple of moments,
right.
It's just to be coveted as a band director. But anyway, just you as a clinician, you as a musician, how do you attribute to all these skills that you picked up? I know you've been there for a long time, but maybe from your college education to becoming a band director, where do you feel this all came together for you?
I would say my love for the literature came from college ensemble for sure. My love for trying to create the sound that we have started with Richard Saucedo, and with being able to work with him for 20 years at Carmel, and us kind of creating that sound together along with Chris Crakey and Andy Cook on what was going to be important to us. So I think that's kind of where all of that started, that love of just trying to create the best sound possible. And that, I love it when Lincoln just drives 3.5 hours to sit in an hour and a half rehearsal because he had a snow day. That's the kind of thing, like you were talking about earlier. It's like, we're still asking people to tell us what we're not good at. Even 35 years later, teaching, it's like, we're still bringing in people, not to tell us how great we are, at all, but to come in and say, okay, this isn't working for you. Right. And so even at this point, still finding those people, and they're everywhere, and they'll always help. We had Kevin Sedetol from Michigan State in for 2 days last school year. And, all we did was say, hey, could you come down? And he's like, yeah, I'll come down. And so I think your comment about just ask people, if there's a band that you really love, I would love to go down and sit in a Hebron rehearsal at some point in time, or Vandergrift, or with Jarrett and those guys. And just, it is the ability, the community is giving, the community isn't holding secrets, right? We're not trying to not tell you things so that we will compete better than you. I mean, that's not, for Carmel in particular, the word winning is never used in a rehearsal, or losing. It's just, how can we be great at this? And so if someone comes to us and says, tell me about this, then we're going to tell them, and we're going to give them what we think, is going to help them be better. And that, to be honest, I'm sorry, but I remember Richard Saucedo and myself and Chris Crakey at a BOA regional, I believe it was in Ohio, and listening to Marian Catholic. This is 1996. It was probably 1996 or 95. And listening to Marian Catholic and Lake Park from Illinois, and going to those guys. And I remember Greg Bim just basically saying, I'll tell you everything. Carmel owes an awful lot, as most of us do, to Greg Bim in terms of how we sound. And hearing a group, you go, oh, wait, you can sound like that on the field? I didn't realize that. And then you go to them and you ask them for the help.
Yeah, I constantly talk about moments in my life and moments in my career, and mine goes with Hart High School in California. It was 2005. It was at their invitational, and I got a chance to hear a chord resonate outside, and it caught me off guard because it was the awakening of what you do inside can happen outside, if not
Right.
better. And it was, and they were not a large ensemble. They were maybe 88 strong, but it was probably one of the best fundamental chords I've ever heard in my career. It sticks out in my brain as a moment. And it was that was after the moment I invested in intonation, because you're right. And maybe this is a hot take, but I don't think competition has ever been the driver for any of us. And maybe it is. It's not for me. I always think it's odd to do your job and to do it well, and really you're just being recognized for the job that you're doing.
Sure.
And maybe you can address this, but as long as you're not finishing 11th out of 10 bands, you're doing something right if you're giving 100%, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so, like, you can speak from a different a standpoint. How many, talk about the makeup of your band program, like how many concert bands, how many jazz bands, how to get in the marching band.
But before I get into that, on a side
Yep.
note, I assume you're talking about William S. Hart
Yep.
High School. Yeah, I'm their writer. I
Oh.
write their marching band shows. Anyway, interesting. Yeah, and that's Anthony Bailey.
Yep.
Unreal musician. Again,
I owe
with a
him my
small program.
career.
No, yeah,
Tell him.
I'll tell him. So the makeup of the band program, curricularly, there are 6 concert bands that meet throughout the school year. So from August through May, they are ability based. And so we have 4 upperclassmen concert bands and 2 freshman concert bands. Usually there's about 150 to 160 freshmen in our band program. Now, freshmen do have the opportunity to audition up into one of the honors ensembles. And I think this year we have maybe 3 or 4 that made it up to there. So we have those 6 concert bands that rehearse all throughout the school year. During what they would call the traditional marching band season, we have somewhere between 280 and 300 students who choose to do marching band. There are no auditions. If you sign up, you're going to march. And that group rehearses never during the school day at all. It's always either there's a short music rehearsal before school starts each morning, about 40 minutes of literally concert F, and then a couple hours in most of the afternoons. So our August through, as far as the school year, our August through November looks like that. The color guard class also is occurring at the same time. So they're in a curricular class that they are in for the entire school year. And so their life right now is, of course, WGI, but during the fall, they're in the marching band. When marching band is over, the concert bands, of course, stay where they're at. And then we have 5 jazz ensembles that rehearse every morning in what we call the 0 period, and they'll rehearse all the way through the end of the school year. We also have about 20 private lesson faculty that are rotating in and out of the classes, where students can take lessons during their school day. So they're out of my rehearsal for 30 minutes working with, a member of the Indianapolis Symphony Orchestra, or a member of the professional community around Indianapolis. Also, middle school students can come in the afternoon. The high school is open for them, and they take lessons during that point in time. Color guard is still working during the second half of the semester. And that's kind of the basic overview of what happens. We have a lot of our private lesson faculty are also in charge of our chamber music program. So we have several large choirs and several coached quartets and quintets throughout the school year, which I think is very, very important in our development. The private lesson program was developed about 13 years ago. It started with, I think, 4 teachers and about 35 kids. And now it's up to 20 plus teachers with hundreds of private lessons being given every week.
Yeah, maybe one day we should do or maybe you talk about the summer at the Director Academy about, for those out there, and as a former administrator myself, there are some challenges. Not every district's going to support private lessons.
Sure.
in the thing, but there are ways to accomplish this, and maybe talking through these and maybe doing a public forum about this might help people. Because like I always say, don't be afraid of your admin. And I think it goes back to just talk to people, and you're going to find out that people are people. And if you don't ask, you only can be told no if you ask. So don't wait for the no. So I actually like to, maybe talk about some down down the road talk about maybe like how that 35 turned into a couple hundred. Cause I think, you know, as someone who I used to have a great staff when I was in Arizona, because I was able to do it. And so now for those programs out there that don't have that staff, maybe talking about how you create that. Cause, you know, I feel like some of us band directors are out there trying to do it all our own, trying to compete, so to speak. And you don't have to compete. You just have to create that culture. And speaking of culture, we were talking about Harmony Director. We're talking about some other initiatives, you know, and you said you wanted to talk about some things that you do, maybe not necessarily the Harmony Director, but what are some of the things that you do that make your bands great, or is part of your personal mantra to making bands great?
Sure. So, you know, obviously the Harmony Director is a pretty hot topic right now, and I'm doing a lot of clinics on that specifically, but we're also starting to talk a little bit more about how we approach the basics program itself. So those exercises, a lot of times we'll refer to it as the warm up. Right. And so the traditional band rehearsal is kind of geared towards, we're going to start with some long tones and tuning. We're going to do some scales. We'll do some Bach, or we'll do some chorales maybe. And then we'll just dive right into the literature. And there's a disconnect between the basic program and the literature you're playing. So one of the things that especially Kyle and I do when we're working in the concert band setting is that we try to connect our very simple exercise program, which to be honest is based off of Eddie Green. And take that concept and make sure that how we're teaching the literature is kind of mirroring that. So the idea of, you know, if you're familiar at all with the Eddie Green stuff or the essential musicianship books, which are incredible, right? The first exercise is just a whole note F concert and then a whole note rest. And you can look at that and you can go, well, there's not much to that. I shouldn't spend too much time on that. And so we have the opposite approach to that, where it's kind of like we're spending 80% of our time, 90% of our time on these, you know, this small list of exercises to try to perfect them. And so the concept is that we're creating reflexes. So the whole note F, we can unpack for an hour. And we have, you know, with our bands, and just say, okay, we're going to work on this for a long span of time. There are so many things about that just simple one note that you can talk about. You can talk about the purity of the attack. You can talk about the organization of the release, or you can talk about the consistency of the middle. But the reflex that's created when you work on just one note over and over again is that no matter where they are in the literature, every note should feel the same. So we'll do some exercises where, like, if we're working on a concert band piece that has a fairly tough harmonic content or has a lot of tessitura considerations, where we put the F concert right next to that note. And so we'll do this thing where we play a whole note F concert, we'll rest for a measure, and then we'll play whatever that challenge is for a whole note and oscillate back and forth. The idea is that we've done two things here. We're wanting them to feel the relaxation of the note that they're most comfortable with and love the most, because we all love concert F, and then make it feel the same when they go to this very challenging piece, right? But the other thing we're doing is that we're connecting the basics to the literature. So in a similar way, we have an articulation exercise that we do that just has 3 different note lengths. We practice it constantly. Pretty much from 6th grade through 12th grade. And so then that becomes the rhythmic clarity exercise. So that when we get into the literature and we're playing something that's rhythmically complex, we can bring that exercise to that moment. So the idea is that basics don't just happen at the beginning of the rehearsal. They're happening throughout the rehearsal. We do this with our marching band winds. Our percussion staff does this with the percussion element. And we do this with our concert band winds. So that's one of the things that I think is a little bit different about how we approach things, is that truly, and I was talking, I did some clinics in South Carolina a few weeks ago. It's like, really, we only have 5 exercises that we truly work on, right? It's the rule of 80-20, right? We're putting 80% of our time into the 20% that really matter.
Yeah, you got my brain working 100 miles an hour here, because I know, because you like all the words. Clarity, that's one of the words I love. Connection, which is another one of my words. And I was talking to somebody, and this is my problem, is I read too many of the Facebook posts, and then I start getting my personal opinion. I try not to reply. Once in a while I do. I have to admit that. But one of the things that I was talking about to somebody is, like, they just kind of actively put it out there that they're just teaching the music. And I was thinking to myself, well, the warm-ups have a sense of purpose. So what my brain tacked, and that's not the point. The point was that to me, you started with the connection of the concert F as a sax player, my nightmare.
Oh yeah, true. Sorry about that.
It's all good. I've got my ways. I've got a whole thing to talk about on that.
Yeah.
But I was just thinking to myself, how to connect that. It's not so much that sometimes we get caught up in what we do, but sometimes I like to interview the person of what's the thought process. So for example, how would you vocalize some of the things in your rehearsal? Like, because that's what I said. You said something to me like feel, because that is like one of the things that I believe that instruments are based on feels and not on notes and rhythms. Because once you have and I hate to say muscle memory because it's not really the word that I use, but once things feel a certain way, and it goes back to Hart High School. Once you learn to teach your kids to resonate on that one chord, it should apply to all of them. Once you get them to read dynamics, it should apply to all of them. And so that goes back to that connection thing. So what are some of the words that you use? Like say we're doing this concert F, and then you're going into the, you're taking a bar rest and you're going into this harmonic connection. What are some of the things that you say, or what are some of the things that are in your head that's important for this?
Yeah. And so that's a good question. And so the buzzwords that we'll use in that specific exercise would be like we're saying feel, but also comfort, and also being able to hear as clearly, right? When we're playing concert F, there's a clarity to what we hear. There's a singularity to what we want to listen to. Once we get into a complex, if we're working on Persichetti or something like that, where it's just really super complex chord structure, they can get lost in all of the information that's going around them. And so just having them really stay calm and just try to relate what they're doing to what they hear at all times. So what do you feel, but also what do you hear? You kind of got my head going now a little bit too. One of the things that we talk to our kids about is that being a musician is very much like being an architect, in that we want architects to be artists. We want beautiful buildings, right? But an architect also has to be a very, very strong engineer, because we want those buildings not to fall into the ground. So when we are working on the concert F or those simple exercises, we're building their engineering skills so that when we get into the literature, they can be musical, they can be artists with the knowledge that their engineering isn't going to fail them. Right. So the group that's just working on the literature, right? Maybe they're doing a quick tuning and then just going right into the literature. Their kids may be great artists. In fact, I believe that we're all inherently better artists than engineers on our instrument, because we've been listening to music since we were born. So we understand phrases, we understand, how a piece of music rises and falls, those kind of things. We understand those in our body already, but our engineering lets us down. And that's what's going to happen in those situations. You're going to ask the band to play, very emotional, and when we say emotional, usually we mean get louder, right? But just get bigger and stuff. And their engineering is going to fail them. Their tonal concept is going to fail them. Their balance concept is going to fail them, right? Instead of working on, we talked about, we do the concert F exercise, we do the articulation exercise. We have a very simple 5 chord progression that we work on all year long, from our 9th graders to our seniors to our top band that Lincoln had done a video of. And so those 5 chords teach our kids the reflex of, how do I react if I'm the 3rd? How do I react if I'm the 5th, in terms of tempering my pitch and also volume. So again, the idea that you're an architect, right? And so you have to have the engineering skills to back up your musicality.
Yeah. So you got my brain going a million miles an hour here. Cause here's my thing. You said the knowledge word. That's also one of my buzzwords in the classroom. And so here's my hot take, is that there are 2 things that go out into the classroom: information and communication. And to me, information is the one-way trip. That's the stuff, as a band director, we say, or even as the students say, but communication is the round trip. And so coming back to home. So how do you know when your kids have knowledge, or what, when do you know that they have grasp that concept. And I don't have to have a specific answer for that, because, I'm thinking to myself, yeah, there's if I go from major to minor, or if I even go do even further on the chords, and I'm expecting my kids, when do they actually listen? How do I know? Where does this knowledge, how do your students showcase knowledge, or what are some of your thoughts on how you get that to happen?
Yeah. So one of the things when we look at exercises, there's the what, right? What the exercise is. There's the how you're doing it. And then there's the why. We're going to focus on the why. And one of the things that we do in our classroom that kind of along what you're talking about is that even though I'm talking a lot right now, in my rehearsals, I don't talk this much. It's more the students giving the feedback. And so a lot of times if we'll say, okay, we're going to play this articulation exercise, I will ask a random student, or I'll ask for someone to volunteer, tell us why we play this exercise. So if a student will say, hopefully something like the articulation exercise is so that we learn how to articulate without changing our sound. That's the ultimate goal of any articulation exercise, is to show clarity of length of note, but also still have the resonance. So we ask our students a lot to be involved in, why are we playing this exercise? And because a lot of times they're boring exercises. And I think that's another reason people skip past it. It's like, I can work, and Kyle Young can do the same thing. We can work on a concert F for 30 minutes and keep them involved, because we're going from having one person play it to having 3 people to play it. And then a group over here is making the feedback, right? We have a rule about feedback in our classroom too, that if you're going to make a comment, the first thing you do is you say something you liked. So a student plays the articulation exercise. The first person that anyone is going to say out of their mouth is going to be, I really liked how you did this. The second half of it is that you don't state a problem, you give a solution. Right. So instead of saying, David, you were out of tune. Right. Yeah. I haven't helped you. Right. I haven't done anything to make you better. Rather than, the student would say, I think you need to use a little bit more air here, or maybe firmer embouchure here, or something like that. So that's one of how you're talking about specifically. Yeah. We're having our kids involved in telling us the why. And by the way, if you can't answer the why on any exercise that's in your exercise book, whether it's this thin, which is ours, or if it's this thick, right? If you can't answer the why, like, why do we play this exercise every day? Then you need to get rid of that exercise. And that's just a personal opinion. I don't want to offend anyone who loves lots of exercises, but rehearsal time is finite for sure, right? And so using exercises that aren't going to directly relate to the literature isn't beneficial. So the other thing too, when you're talking about the specifics of tuning and balance, we do a lot of singing. Probably when most people come to our rehearsals, it's almost an uncomfortable amount of singing, especially if you're using a harmony director. If you're not singing, then you're kind of wasting the $600 that you spent, because the harmony director doesn't connect to the trumpet, and it doesn't connect to the clarinet, or certainly the saxophone. It connects to the brain and the ears, and then through the horn. So we sing a lot. But we also have a series of hand signals that we do when we're singing triads and sevenths, that the students are showing me their understanding of raising and lowering based on temperament. Right. And we can get into a conversation about temperament, but it's about a 4-hour conversation. But, the idea that if you're on the third and it's major, you're lowering it. If you're on the third and it's minor, you're raising it. If you're the perfect fifth, you're raising it slightly. And another thing that makes us a little different, I think, than some people is that we never talk about the number system, the minus and plus of temperament. Like if I look, oh my God,
I just was going to ask. I have a hot take on this.
Okay.
And so, here's my hot take: that no one needs to know the numbers. You just need to go think. I call it flatline, or a code blue. I just need things to get into a sense of a right. thing, because I've gotten into this. We were talking about earlier about major and minor and just making those differences. And so really it comes back to when when do you feel, this is my question actually, when do you feel kids can hear? I have my bias. I'm sadly full of bias, but I have this bias that kids can't start to hear until somewhere between ages 14 and 16, and they're compensating for what they can't do until they can. And there's no magic number or magic age. And this comes from my private studio, teaching kids all the way down to 4th, 3rd grade. But there's something I can get kids to play in tune, but I can almost fake it because it goes back to that knowledge content. But it really right around between 14, 15, or 16 years old, they start to adjust with the ability to hear it. And I'll even go back with my own personalization. I could not do a ballad or something like that with texture and flow until I was in my mid 20s and almost 30 before I could hear it. So what's your take on that?
Well, I would say this is that our middle school programs, which are awesome, all 3 of them are incredible. In 6th grade, we're obviously not talking about any of this. We're just like, they all use harmony directors and they're using them as the unison. So here's this note, match this note, right? 7th grade, I would say that that they probably start talking about triads to an extent late in that. And then in 8th grade, we're starting to talk about blending and balance and tuning of triads. To an extent, but I mean, as far as it's a skill that's constantly developing. So they may be able to understand the why that's important, but like you're saying, they may be 25% successful on it, where we get to our more advanced players who have been hearing this a lot, their ears are going to be developed. And going back to the harmony director and singing, that's where it happens, right? The harmony director has the ability to shift temperament at the touch of a chord, and then having them sing with it. So they're hearing the third being lowered, and we don't use, like I was saying, we don't use the numbers. We use the phrase significant or slight, right? So either it's a significant adjustment up or it's a slight adjustment down. It's never, this is +2. It's like, that's such a definable. I mean, it's definable by hertz per second, but still, it's for a freshman trumpet player. That's what, other than just saying, okay, just make sure you're not low here, or bring that down a little bit.
Yeah, I found a lot of this accidentally. By my first job was teaching choir. Ask me my choir experience before that would be 0. And so I ended up teaching choir, but it actually unlocked the world of singing. And it actually affected my band program more than I realized, because as you said, the singing, do you ever have the kids, like, if they're making adjustment, I just realized I can't do this mirror thing on my thing. Like, do you ever have them make the adjustments of what they're doing just so you can see adjustment from the kids? Like, because like you say, +2, -2, and so my thing, and like I said, I talk to ask for advice. My thing is getting the kids to hear others above themselves. It's kind of like my Ed List philosophy. Right. But if they start listening to each other, then they have a chance. I guess this goes back to the young kids. Then they have a chance to tune because they're listening. Because too many times we sing, but again, do we have the intended purpose of why we're singing and why we're playing? And are we making those adjustments? And by the way, here's a shout out for you. Glenn Fugit, I was talking to him earlier today and he wanted to say hello. And he used to do something, and he's my harmony director friend, because he's the one who bought me my first harmony director.
Nice. That's a good friend.
I know. Well, I took over for him, so it was just kind of there. But he had, he always had this kids. Every kid had a tuner. Yep. So every kid was plugged in. Is that something that you do as well in your program, or is it?
Yes. Every kid has a tuner, and we use that to get a baseline, right? So every stand has a tuner on it. But when we're looking at chords, we're not, or talking about harmonic structure or looking at listening to the harmony director and singing, we're not using that tuner. If we get to a point where it's like, okay, we need to let's check all the high C's of the flutes, which is often, it's like, okay, everyone go down the row and check your tuner. Right. And we actually do on the Eddie Green F concert exercise. And I always apologize to the alto saxes right away. I say,
please do.
Yeah. Is that, okay, we're going to do this, the first whole note, stare at me. Right. So they're not using any reference. Second whole note, stare at your tuner, back and forth. Right. So we're developing both skills. We're developing the ability to get the tuner to center itself, but then also developing that release of, you can do it on your own by making sure that you're matching your trio, right? The people on either side of you are so important to you, right? And we also talk about the concept that your sound isn't just your sound. You have to consider the people around you sound in your sound. So you don't have a sound without the sound of the people on either side of you. But we do use tuners in that way. And they're all like, like you would always see the Texas bands come up to Midwest with them all connected with a microphone. We do that. But we're not referencing it all the time. Like, we're not having the kids stare at it, because it's not going to be correct. I mean,
No.
if we're in a wind ensemble setting, if there's two different notes being played, one of them needs to be what we would call out of tune with the tuner. If there are three notes being played, in most, it should back that up and say in most literature, if we're playing three notes, then two of them can't be in tune with the tuner. They've got to be adjusted one way or other. And this comes from the concept of nature, right? Because when you hear an overtone, if you hear an overtone on an F concert, the first one you're going to hear is the C concert. That C concert isn't in tune with the tuner. It's 2 cents raised, because the pure ratios that we go all the way back to Pythagoras, the pure ratios that Pythagoras used are part of nature. Equal temperament is a man-made process to basically shove 12 notes in an octave and make them slightly not offensive. So that's kind of a little overview of temperament. There's a great book. I don't know if you would like to plug books or not, but
I'll plug away. I love books.
If you're interested in the history of temperament, there's a great book that's called Temperament. So it's convenient to find on Amazon. And it's a really great kind of short and with a little bit of humor involved overview of how we got from Pythagoras to equal temperament, and the actual, there were social battles that happened between secular musicians and sacred musicians on which temperament was going to be used. And so now, obviously, equal temperament becomes the standard, but for wind ensembles, it's a combination of the two. Pure temperament doesn't work perfectly, right? It's why it was one of the temperaments along the way that was developed for certain things to sound great. And those happen to be fifths and thirds. But when we get into chromaticism, we have to adjust that. Right. And it's actually interesting that I'll get one more comment on this, and it comes out of the book. Galileo, who obviously we all know from the study of astronomy. I was almost going to say astrology, and then that would be bad. Astronomy.
Pisces.
Yeah, me too.
Wow.
We know him from the study of astronomy, but actually he was very much involved in trying to create a tuning system as well. And he actually predicted that there needed to be a keyboard that would shift its kind of center of tonal gravity to be able to play in different keys. He literally, and this is, good news for the Yamaha Corporation, he literally predicted the harmony director, right? There needed to be a keyboard that would, if you just play in one key, it shifts itself to that key. And that's the thing that happens with the harmony director, is that if I play an E flat major triad on this keyboard, it's going to shift everything to E flat pure. So E flat is the center, and I call it the center of harmonic gravity. And then every other note is adjusted in relation to that E flat. Right. So that's kind of a little overview of that. But that book, Temperament, it's by, his name went straight out of my head. I'll come back to it.
You can always plop it in the yes. You can
Stuart Isaacoff.
Yeah. And so here's some of the things I always, we talk about, things staying the same and things are different. But like if you ever go from B flat major to G minor and then talk about the B flat.
Oh yeah.
And this goes, but this goes back to like, I'm going to share another idea that you sparked in my head. This goes back to like why intonation, the conversations never end. And then getting your students to have these conversations becomes the thing, because I really believe that intonation is the responsibility of the student. But we have to give them those gifts, and it doesn't have to be perfect, but feel free to be perfect, kids. That'd be great. I'm gonna give him another shout out here. Alex Comiskey is the reason we've never met. I mean, we met. I emailed him once, but I watched him do an honor band in Tennessee and watched him teach. It is the best honor band in terms of intonation that I had ever heard. And it kind of sparked me to start understanding. And that's where my belief in the harmony director came to be, because when I saw somebody doing it in action and then heard the result, I was covetous. I was envious.
Yeah.
And so it was just amazing to hear that band play so in tune in such a little time. And again, one of the ways to save chops on an honor band, that band sang more than it played, and boy, did it play well
Yeah.
when it got to Saturday.
Alex and I have done some things together, and yeah, he's brilliant at all of that. Certainly,
So you got two people to say they've changed my life. You got Hart and you got Alex over there, like people that have, you never know when you make an impact on someone's life, because I'm constantly looking for those answers. And then it was just an idea. It's amazing that we're talking about the tuner thing, because I realized that my tuner supply at school, I finally hit the point where I'm like, oh, I think I'm down to like the exact number of tuners that I can do to survive. So I just did hey, parents, if you want to donate a tuner, I got 10 tuners within the span of a week. So that's just an idea for the audience.
I've done grants. We have done grants to get just tuners and the microphones. It's certainly, it's one of those things where there's a lot of, when it comes to tuners, there's a lot of people who have very specific beliefs about it. Some are like, well, only one kid is going to have a tuner, and then that person is going to be the center of pitch for the whole ensemble. I think that's a viable concept if you use it and you dive into it. Some people would say no tuner at all on the stand, right? And others. So we talk to our kids about this too. It's like, we'll say, okay, what percentage of the time should you use a tuner, and what percentage of the time should you use your ears?
Well,
and most of the time they'll come up. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no! Here's my answer to that. Is like, I tell the kid, the tuner's the answer. It's like having the back of your math book. It's just the answer. It doesn't mean you're right. It just means that's the answer for that time. So
that's a good one.
Yeah. And so I say that all the time, because I said, again, how do I know you're in tune? Well, I can hear it, and I can go, this is how you know you're in tune. I don't care what the tuner says. If you want to play I actually tuned my band to 442, just to be honest and transparent.
Yeah.
Because I'm just a belief of, well, after living in Arizona for 50 years, you're always going to tune sharp, kind of high. But I got so used to that, but it just becomes, when you're in tune, because you're in tune. But the tuners are like, sometimes it's like, put them away, because it's not going to work. And you're right. And so I go on to, you're right. Intonation can become like these hours long conversation on things.
And I also,
here's the book for you.
Yeah. I also think that tuning affects clarity of articulation, and tuning affects all these other concepts, right? So you start with that. And so even if you're working on, how you begin and end a note, if it's not in tune, it's still not going to sound the clarity you want it to sound, for sure.
Clarity is I asked this question on my Facebook page. This goes back to, and wherever I go, whenever I teach, I always say, hey, what's the answer? And people are like, what's the question? I go, that's not the point. What's the answer? And every kid that I've ever taught in an honor band, it's clarity, because clarity is the answer. Whether it's clear articulation, clear intonation, if without clarity, there's just confusion or dissonance. And if there's a place and time for dissonance, but really getting some of that clarity to go out all the time. Like when you want a chord to sound a certain way, it's just, to me, when, like, you can tell by the smile on my face when it hits, because there's clarity, and that's my answers. When I hear it clearly. And then you're right with articulation. Oh my God, I'll spend my life on front side of the note, back side of the note, on how to hit the front side of the note, how to hit the back side of the note.
Sure.
Are you on a brass instrument? Are you on a woodwind instrument? Are you on a percussion instrument? What type of percussion? There are, like I said, this is the can of worms that you're going to drive.
Right. Yeah.
My brain nuts.
The thing that happens with our kids is that we get addicted to overtones. So, we're pretty adept at creating overtones on a concert F, pretty much immediately. And then we'll say, okay, let's go to concert E. Right. And then they're like, wait a minute. Right. And so it takes a few seconds to do that. But that concept of being able to create that on any given pitch. So like the concert F exercise, the whole note exercise, we actually refer to it as first note of the day exercise. Sometimes the first note of the day isn't at concert F. If we're going to work on a segment that's in D flat, we may say, okay, first note of the day today is D flat concert. And so the day starts with, let's see if we can create balance and blend and overtones on D flat or A, depending on where we're going.
Do you have any fundamentals like go-tos for the kids? Like, how do they know you're right? Like for me, like, if you're going to start on, what was I the other day? I was concert C. We were doing Maslanka the other day, and we were doing concert C. And I and I was like, okay, kids, for my enjoyment, let's tune concert C. Do you have any way or any like, things for the kids to say this is, I'm right here, or, how would you address some of that application from concert F to a new chord?
So, which Maslanka?
What am I doing? I am doing Mother Earth. Why am I just blanking?
Nice.
Like
Nice.
It's right. Wait, I think it's right there.
I see it. Yeah. Yeah. So one of the things that we do with our concert F is like a lot of people with the harmony director would just play like FC all up the keyboard, right?
Yeah.
When we start a concert F, or what we call it a full drone. So we'll do a lot of work where we just have, if we're going to play a concert F, we'll just have the C going on the harmony director. Now it's raised a little bit, right? Because it's set to F pure. So then they sing the F concert, but only having the overtone as the reference. So the concept is that they hear every pitch as if it was two pitches. You hear it as its fundamental, and you hear it as its primary overtone, right? We all know that there are more than one overtone in every piece, but the primary one you're going to hear is the fifth. So what we would do with that C concert is I would set the harmony director to C major pure, hold down a G, and say, okay, try to hum a C here. And, there's a wide, yeah, please do. There's a wide range of success, right? But we're getting their ears we're getting their ears engaged, even if they're not being successful. So the idea here is that one thing I'll say, kind of to wrap this kind of concept up, is that a lot of times people are scared to sing because it doesn't go well. And what I say is that, like if we start with our freshmen and we're singing a chorale for the first time and a kid is literally the tritone away from everything he's supposed to be, I don't correct that student, right? Because I know he is at least trying, which means something is engaging in his head more than normal. And so we're going to start gradually having more and more success. But I don't go through and go, okay, well, Johnny, you were a tritone away. It's all this, right? It's always a sax player.
Well, I'm impressed Johnny knew what a tritone was.
Just kidding. But, people give up on the singing because it's uncomfortable, and you shouldn't, especially if you're using a harmony director, or even if you're not.
I think it's habits. I think that's the habits that we create, because like I said, I am the terrible singer. You can hear the raspiness in my throat. What I learned though is I can what's in my head and what can come out of my mouth are sometimes two different things, but I can definitely take time to find it. But I would encourage everyone to sing all the time, because I think, when I was adjudicating last month, that was like, 50% of my comments is sing this more, because it was a jazz festival. And so like, to me, it's like, if you want to unify articulation, why don't you sing them so that they're unified, and then try to put the approach of what we sang to what we heard. What we heard is what we're playing. And otherwise you're going to have a different type of approach. And so that's some of those things. And here's another wondering for me is like, I make my kids sing a concert F or a concert B flat out without any reference at any time.
I like that.
I am constantly shocked. They nail it every time, unless I've thrown so many reference pitches ahead of time, like they can't fathom what's referencing. But if you ask the kids to sing a concert B flat or a concert F, I'll bet you 9 times out of 10 they're going to nail it without even having any prior knowledge.
Well, they've developed that relative pitch over the course of their illustrious careers. If they've been playing for 4 or 5, 6 years, they know what that feels like.
So let's, I get scared because we've already been going 54 minutes and I do not want to end. So we're going to go a couple more minutes here. Okay. But I mean, what do you say to the band director out there who doesn't have a harmony director, or like, the things that we've been talking about? Because, I laugh once, it always comes down to a couple things. Pedagogy is one thing. How the students, student interaction is another thing. And I know this is a culture thing, but I really think intonation is a culture that we need to like have I would love to have like a round table panel discussion. Like I said, we get to meet finally in June. And so like I will, I believe in the power of conversation, and the person that's sitting on the outside that hears others talk picks up 10 things that you don't even know you said.
Right.
So
Right.
what do you say to what do you say to the director out there that has never thought about this, doesn't have a harmony director? What is just, an initial thought of like, what, start tomorrow, do blah.
Sure. Well, harmony director or not, there are certainly apps. Total Energy is a great one to plug them. Where you get some of the same uh, strengths of the harmony director, even free online. There's drones that you can do. There was Salcedo and I started with the Schwartz CDs. I don't know if you know what those were, or if anyone knows what those were. It was a CD with just perfect fifths in every key. And so
I
we
have
would
them,
use,
I'm sure.
yeah, they're on my Apple Music. So if I'm not careful and I turn my car on, A comes up on my
Oh,
car.
I do have,
Just
yep.
A and E. Anyway, so I mean, you can start with that, but the thing too is that singing doesn't cost anything. Um, Picking one note and trying to perfect it isn't an expense, but it's a valuable use of time for sure. So if we go back to what we talked about earlier, is that look at what you're doing every day for your basics. We don't even use the word warm up. We have ensemble basics time or ensemble development. Warm up is what they do before class. So ensemble, if our kids see ensemble up on the screen, they know that means we're going to be spending some time on that for a while. So start with that. You mentioned the summer camp, formerly the summer symposium. One of the things that we're bringing to that this year is a harmony director intensive. So I'm creating 3 80-minute classes, that kind of spiral on each other, that will happen Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So if you're on the fence about going there and you're like, you really want to know more about this,
Here we go.
look at that. That would be something we're going to be offering, as well as Yamaha is providing a dozen harmony directors, and we're going to create a dedicated lab for the week. And so there'll be private lessons and small group instruction, as well as the full classes on harmony.
If you're out there listening, I just want to interrupt there for a second, but it's camp.musicforall.org. If you're looking for all of this information, about registration, what the camp has, it's the Sweetwater Director Academy. But yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there, camp.musicforall.org. But I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
no, it's fine. Who's that guy?
I've heard of him.
Yeah, I've heard of him. It's just a matter of, when you go back to your original question, is just trust. You have to trust that if you work on the basics, if you develop your ensemble skills more, then the literature itself will improve just as quickly. I think there's that concept of, I can't do much of that today because we've got to get to the literature. It's like, it really should be the opposite. And also that the basic skills can happen throughout the rehearsal, right? We'll stop in the middle. Like we have 2 different bands, both working on Miss Lenka pieces, and we'll stop in the middle of those and go, how far away are we? The phrase we use a lot is, how far away are we from our best concert F sound right now? And most of the time, some kid will say, well, a couple thousand miles, right? It's like, okay, well then let's go back to concert F. So in the middle of, right now, our top band is doing started work on Child's Garden of Dreams.
I saw that in the video. That's how I knew you were playing it.
So, there's a lot in that. And so we'll stop in the middle and go, where are we right now with our sound? One of our freshman groups is doing Illumination, which is a great, we don't really talk a lot about literature. It's a great introductory piece of Meslenka, because so much of the Meslenka is unattainable by anybody. It's so hard and great and important.
Yeah. Well, I hate to, we're running out of time because, actually we ran out of time, but, I've got so many thoughts going on in my head, but I just want to give one last plug for the Sweetwater Director Academy out there. Nola, if you're listening, don't put my sessions during Michael's. I want to go watch. So just a little that. But before you go, I always ask all of my guests to like maybe let us know how to get a hold of you, and then maybe share a final thought on culture or anything we talked about today.
Yeah. So my email is up there, and certainly that is, anyone. I love to talk about tuning. I love to talk about basics. So just reach out and we can correspond through email or even set up a Zoom. My website has a contact page in it, and also a list of some clinics and things that I'm available for. As far as a final thought, I love what we talked about at the beginning, the idea of, even as I'm incredibly old and been doing this for so long, it's like I'm still trying to be better at it, and trying to find people who know something that I don't know, and bring them in and try to learn from them. And I think if you're a first year, second year, third year teacher, find those people now, because I was very lucky to have Richard Saucedo as that person. And I often say that he saved me. But find those people who are really the ones that the Greg Bims and even, it doesn't have to be someone of that, incredible, not, well known. There are great teachers everywhere in small band programs, incredible teachers. So find those people, get them.
And just for our listeners out there, his email is mpote, MPOTE music LLC. So MPOTE music LLC @gmail.com. Can you pull up the website again? It's because michaelpotemusic.com. You think I'd remember?
That's pretty
that
easy.
After, it is when you're in remembrance mode. But
yeah.
Oh my gosh, sir, I would love to just sit and do conversation. I can band nerd out all the time. I can also talk a little bit of basketball and things here and there, but all of us who are musicians, and you said it best. If you're young out there, go meet people, talk to them, because eventually it becomes maybe a friend or maybe somebody that you can refer back to, or an interaction that you remember. My students think I know everybody. I don't. I'm very talkative.
Right.
I'm not shy to go introduce, because how am I supposed to learn if you all don't share with me? Just throwing that out.
Sure.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today. Just fascinating information.
All right. Thank you. Really enjoyed it. Let's do it again.
Oh, thank you. Yes, please. All right. Well, we are so glad you could join us today. This is just a friendly reminder that you can explore our past episodes. Like, I would go back and review this one on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Facebook. You can find them, but really just go to musicforall.org/podcast. You can always reach me at david.duarte@me.com. If you don't hear from me, do it again. Kind of busy, but all right. I want to thank the fantastic Culture Before Content team for everything they do. Patrick, you've been amazing on pulling things up at notice, but I look forward to doing this again next week, and I hope to see you all real soon.